Hi, I'm Loris Alexander. This is Bridge City News, and here are some of the top stories we've been following. Unions for healthcare workers have rejected proposals from the province to extend labor negotiation delays until the summer. Plus, our nation is monitoring guidance on the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine amid a potential link to blood clots. And Lethbridge officials plea for compliance as COVID-19 cases spike.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Thanks for joining us. Unions for healthcare workers have rejected proposals from the province to extend labor negotiation delays until the summer. Bargaining teams for general support services and nursing care have rejected a proposal from Alberta Health Services to extend an existing memorandum of agreement, delaying labor negotiations until June 30th. AUPE President Guy Smith said that we should protect workers and not hold COVID protections and supports hostage as a bargaining chip. We believe frontline healthcare heroes deserve better than that. That is why we rejected this offer. Scientists in Europe have reportedly found a link between the AstraZeneca Oxford COVID-19 vaccine and extremely rare but potentially fatal blood clots. But Canadian public health officials have so far provided no concrete update on guidance for the shot. News broke on Friday that researchers in Germany and Norway said they had found a mechanism that could cause the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine to create the blood clots in very rare circumstances, in addition to identifying a possible treatment for it. The finding comes after the European Medicines Agency investigated 25 cases of the rare blood clots out of 20 million AstraZeneca shots given and concluded on Thursday that the benefits from the vaccine far outweigh its possible risks, although a definitive link could not be ruled out. Lethbridge officials made a public plea for residents to closely follow health orders on Friday, and in an effort to stymie spiking cases of COVID-19 that Mayor Chris Spearman called an aberration to the provincial trend. On March 18th, Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, specifically referenced Lethbridge as a community that is currently experiencing concerning new trends in its case numbers. Active cases in the city have increased from 196 to 469 since February 25th and are linked to family gatherings, visitation between households, and people with mild symptoms who do not stay home or get tested right away. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he is confident the Liberal government's approach to gun control is the right one, but added he's open to hearing suggestions for improvement. Trudeau hinted Friday at a willingness to modify recently tabled legislation after family members of women killed in the 1989 Ecole Polytechnique massacre denounced the bill as a dismal effort that would not make society safer.
I want to begin by thanking all the extraordinary advocacy groups like Police se souvient, who for many, many years have ensured that not only are the 14 women killed at École Polytechnique not forgotten, but that Canada continues to move forward on strengthening gun control. That's something that we've taken seriously as a government with strong measures during our first mandate, but also as of last spring, it is now illegal to buy, to sell, or to use assault weapons in this country. We're continuing to move forward with further legislation, including measures that limit importation of ammunition across our border, strengthen border measures, give municipalities more tools to ban handguns, and other things that are going to keep Canadians safe. And I look forward to the parliamentary hearings on that bill to make sure that we're doing everything we can. But as always, I continue to stand with survivors and families of victims of violence against women, of gender-based violence, and we will always work together.
Samantha Barnes is a single mother with young twins. She said her cold and drafty apartment in Lethbridge was horrible as she and her kids shivered through the winter months without adequate heat. Barnes said after repeated requests to get the problems fixed, her landlord tried to end the tenancy, refused her rent payment, and allegedly changed the lock on her door. The two sides have agreed to settle the dispute, with Barnes receiving a check for $20,000, with Avenue Living insisting it did nothing wrong during the tenancy.
It's very stressful living there. I don't wish it on anybody, which is why I really wanted to speak out, because nobody should have people coming in that much to the point where it stresses you out, to where you have to walk on eggshells in your own place because you don't know when they're gonna just show up to come in for another inspection, and they don't give you any reasoning for the inspections either. And then the heat on top of that, with it constantly breaking down, something I don't wish on anybody either, because living like that, and especially with having small children, it was horrific. I've never lived in conditions like that before until I lived with Avenue Living.
Avenue Living is one of the biggest landlords in Western Canada, with 10,000 apartments in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. The executive director of the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen has taken it upon himself to fundraise for the charity. Bill Ginther says the kitchen has hit various roadblocks with previous plans to merge with the Mustard Seed. Now he's requesting churches, companies, and individuals to step up and help feed the hungry.
We've realized it's a very significant drop in our donations since January. And we understand it's because of the fact that with our upcoming merge and the city's reluctance to approve anything, our deadlines for when this is happening keep getting pushed back. And I think people are uncertain, so they don't know what to do. Some people have shifted their donations to the Mustard Seed, or have said we'll wait till they start up. And so we are spending twice as much as we're getting in, which is very rare for us, first in our history. And so we decided that we should really put the word out there that we need some help. Very hesitantly, because we've had a lot of support. People have been very good about making funds available to us, because they recognize the service that we provide is very necessary. There's a lot of controversy around working with homeless people. There's a lot of naysayers when it comes to even joining the Mustard Seed, because of the fact that they are doing this from a Christian perspective, and we know that's going to be the case. A hearing is finally being held at City Hall on the 23rd at 4 o'clock.
If you'd like to make a contribution, you can call Bill Ginther at 587-220-8688. The gardening industry has seen a spike in popularity during the pandemic, and 2021 is expected to be another busy year. While it's still a bit early to get your gardening tools out, experts say now is a good time to plan what you are wanting to plant so you're ready to go even when the warmer weather hits.
Super busy. We are so excited. We're planting seeds in the greenhouse. Our tomatoes are growing, our peppers. We're looking forward to this year. And everyone has spring fever already. People are really interested in vegetable gardening. We had our first batch of potatoes and onions come in, and they went really fast. We've got more coming weekly. But I can see the trend is planting gardens. People want to grow their own food. It's good to kind of fix the soil up, add amendments, add peat moss, add different composts and things like that. Let's get the ground ready. And working the ground, you can do it at any time. Too early to plant. We don't recommend planting annuals actually until after a long weekend in May, but there's lots of things you can do before that. And there's perennials, there's trees and shrubs that will be arriving in the middle of April. So it seems a little early now, but there's lots of prep time. You can also be pruning trees and ask your experts on how to do things.
Recapping one of our top news stories, Lethbridge officials made a public plea for residents to closely follow health orders on Friday, and in an effort to stem spiking cases of COVID-19 that Mayor Chris Spearman called an aberration to the provincial trend. And a look at weekend weather. Tonight, just a few clouds with increasing cloudiness after midnight and a low of -2. A mix of sun and cloud tomorrow, with the sun becoming west 40 kilometers per hour, gusting to 60 in the afternoon, along with a high of 9.
Today's weather is brought to you by ColumbianDirect.com. Café Coffee, specialty coffee from our family to yours.
So what exactly is involved with the province's recall legislation? The bill, which would allow you to fire your local politician. Our legislative reporter, Tyler Dawson, will explain what is involved with the recall legislation in just a moment.
There appears to be a defining crisis in Alberta politics this week, and it involves Bigfoot. Yeah, there's a Netflix movie where Bigfoot vanishes and his family goes out to save him. Now, the bad guy in the movie is the oil industry. The Alberta War Room launched a campaign telling Netflix, listen guys, you got to tell the truth, enough of this. And to talk more about this in detail is our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, joining me from Edmonton. Tyler, the UCP have been attacking the film while the NDP say the attack really is a national embarrassment.
Certainly, this is, as you say, the big crisis in Alberta politics right now. Netflix family film, it's called Bigfoot Family. The gist of it, Bigfoot goes missing, and the family goes after him. They end up sort of entangled with this resource extraction oil company in Alaska. Now, part of it is that they plan to extract oil by dropping bombs and things like that, which, funnily enough, actually was a strategy considered in Alberta back in the 50s. But anyways, the War Room launched an attack. It says, tell Netflix to tell the truth. You know, a few thousand people have signed this letter saying it's spreading misinformation about the oil and gas industry. This happened, I think, late last week. And, admittedly, a bunch of us were sort of scratching our heads to just, double checking to make sure this was a real thing and not, a joke. But no, it was real. And the Premier's been out defending the attack by the War Room against Netflix, the Energy Minister, and the NDP, as you say, saying, come on, you guys, you're going after a kid's film. Do you want the Lorax ban next? So it's been a little bit of drama over this, but, maybe on the flip side, it's a little bit lighter fare than we're usually seeing on the political front these days.
But you know something, Tyler? I'm thinking people are going after Dr. Seuss lately. They went after Mr. Potato Head. Hey, why not? Take a shot at a kid's movie too, kid's film too, right?
May as well, I suppose, yeah.
More people have been discussing the potential of a sales tax here in Alberta. I have to be careful I don't say those words too loudly. But polling from Angus Reid says even if academics like the idea, the majority of Albertans do not, and that includes supporters of both the UCP and the NDP.
Yeah, if you take it all the way across the board, about 62% of Albertans don't want a sales tax of any size. So that would be 1 to 2%, 3 or 4, 5 or more. Nobody is really that fond of it. Now, of course, you could flip that poll on its head and say, 38% of Albertans actually do want a sales tax, a sizable minority. You could frame it that way. But what is sort of relevant about this majority, this solid majority of people that don't want it across all age groups, and I should say more or less across all income levels, is that Jason Kenney has said if there is going to be a PST in this province, it's going to come in via referendum, which of course means that the majority view in polling is going to matter. And there is a little bit of variation. For example, in those that make more than $100,000, what Angus Reid found was that about 45% of them actually support a PST. And then if you go to the other end of the spectrum, those making $50,000 a year or less, only 35% of them support it. The idea that a progressive sales tax, a provincial sales tax is not, in fact, progressive, affects the poor more than the wealthy. So strong headwinds ahead should any government ever actually get around to attempting to put in a PST. But as we talked about the other week, it's political suicide tax. So we'll have to see if anyone ever tries to give it a go.
Well, yeah, I mean, that would take away the Alberta advantage, definitely. The only province in Canada without a PST. Now, there's also been a discussion on budget estimates, Tyler. Now, it appears as though we will not be able to balance the budget in Alberta for quite some time here. Alberta is still coming out of the recession, plus we've had the COVID-19 pandemic. In question period in QP, the talk was about homelessness and municipal spending. Tell me more.
That's right. So there's sort of the estimates in the budget, the numbers in the budget that we've all seen. There are sort of discussions ongoing about all of that, where they sort of dig into the numbers a little bit more. So there's been questions, as you said, about funding for homelessness, funding for housing, municipal transfers. The War Room, of course, came up this week because they were asking about how much the War Room is being paid to do its job. So it's just, the budget conversation, I guess what I'm trying to say is continuing and is a subject of discussion within the legislature, and that's eating up a fair amount of time in question period, in between all the usual fun mudslinging that is happening.
Now, the UCP has gone through a rewrite of the education curriculum, and in the Northwest Territories, students there actually learn the Alberta curriculum, and the NDPs say that with the UCP rewrite, educators in the Territories may be dropping the curriculum, or Tyler, is that a bit of an inaccurate speculation?
Well, it's a little bit unclear. You're right. The NDP has said that they've been told by sources, I guess, in the Northwest Territories government that they are going to switch to the British Columbia curriculum. Now, inaccurate speculation is exactly what the education minister in Alberta called it, saying that this is part of an ongoing and normal review that the territory does. And that part of it is true as well. The territory is going through a normal review, and it's looking at curricula in British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Yukon, and Nunavut. So it remains to be seen a little bit whether or not they actually switch to another curriculum or if they keep Alberta's. Now, this, of course, goes all the way back to this controversy we had some time ago when the curriculum review panel ended up in controversy because of some of the people who'd been on the panel who critics felt had, I guess you might say, socially conservative or historically conservative views. So it's just a little bit of a way, I suppose, that the NDP is keeping some of the air in the sails on the education controversy, so to speak. But as of this exact moment, of course, we don't actually know for sure what the Northwest Territories is going to do.
Here's a question as well. Why don't educators and legislators in the Northwest Territories write their own curriculum, education curriculum?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually have no idea. And I was surprised learning about it that the Yukon and Nunavut do have their own. So it is a bit, actually, honestly, a bit of a mystery to me why they haven't done their own as well.
Tyler, was promised during the last provincial election, and the UCP finally delivered recall legislation. I've asked a couple of politicians about it here, and yeah, it makes them a little bit nervous about it. Now, this would allow locals to potentially fire their MLAs. It would also apply to municipal leaders, including mayors and councillors. Now, explain how this really works, the recall legislation.
Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated and tricky than it sounds like on the face of it. Now, you'd mentioned that Alberta is the only place without a provincial sales tax. If we got this, a recall, we would be only one of two provinces that has recall legislation, the other one, of course, being British Columbia. Now, the breakdown of how this would go about works like this. In order to set up the recall of a provincial politician, you need 40% of all constituents to sign this recall form, shall we say. This will then lead to a constituency-wide referendum. That referendum is done on a simple majority vote, so 50 plus 1. If the recall side wins, the politician gets yanked and it goes to a by-election. Now, it's a little bit different on the municipal front. A municipal politician can be recalled with 80% of the local voters, but once that comes in, it's finished. They're out. There's no constituency referendum. And it also applies to school board trustees, which has an even lower threshold, I believe, of 40% of voters as well. So it's kind of interesting in the sense that some people are saying, this is anti-democratic because it's way too hard for people to recall their politicians. And then you have other people saying this is anti-democratic, it's way too easy. So it's sort of trying to set, a little bit of a balance where the government obviously wants to have some sort of stability. And if the NDP were in government, certainly they would want this stability as well. But they're also fulfilling this sort of grassroots promise to have recall legislation available. So we'll have to see if it ever gets used because, it's an awful lot of legwork to get out and collect all those signatures to organize this sort of thing.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, a number of years ago, isn't that how Arnold Schwarzenegger became governor of California? Because Californians enacted their recall legislation, weren't happy with their governor, fired him, and that's how Schwarzenegger got in? Do you remember that?
I honestly can say I do not remember that, okay. But I would believe it. California, you think Alberta politics are crazy. Man, California's way wilder.
And they had the Terminator for a while, so there you go. Now, Premier Jason Kenney is beaming a little more these days, Tyler, after he said his party has delivered around 75% of their campaign promises, including this recall legislation. Now, you believe that the annual general meeting could get a little rambunctious, maybe 6 months before the next election? Can you explain?
Yeah, that's right. Jason Kenney's going to face a leadership review. So, brass tacks of that, the UCP membership's going to decide if they want Jason Kenney to lead their party into the next election. Um, these things are ran from the grassroots of the party. He can't really stop this sort of thing. So it's going to happen. There's no obvious successor to Jason Kenney, obviously. He does have parties tracking to his right. He does have, relatively low approval ratings, but that I don't think is abnormal, sort of midterm and in the middle of a pandemic. But yeah, the party's going to have to think about it. He's going to have to think about it. And of course, the big thing that you mentioned is that it'll only be 6 months before the next election, which would give them very little time to get their house in order if they intend to win that election.
The NDP plans a private member's bill here in Alberta that would ban coal mining and exploration on the eastern slopes of the Canadian Rockies. What has the UCP really said about it?
Well, they've been asked about it in question period a couple times recently, and they've basically said that when the NDP was in government, they supported coal exploration, and the UCP government supports coal workers, people in rural communities, things like that. Now, this, of course, is happening in this much larger context about coal exploration and the changes to the 1976 coal policy that they changed and then decided not to change. And I believe now they're doing a sort of public consultation on what to do about coal. But of course, the big issue down in southern Alberta, in the communities west of Lethbridge there. And just on Wednesday, Corb Lund, the country singer, put out another sort of statement video thing saying people need to keep an eye on it. So, what happens with a private member's bill is a little bit unclear at this point. It's not likely to wildly change the situation, but it's clear it's going to be a political hot potato, let's say, for the next little while, no doubt about that.
And speaking of country singers, Paul Brandt also came out against a lot of the coal mining too, right? So that's quite interesting there. Tyler, the UCP recently announced that Southern Alberta will be receiving some new schools, including a much-needed elementary school here in Lethbridge on the west side. We have so much high density there, we desperately need one. But Lethbridge isn't the only jurisdiction receiving a new Southern Alberta school.
That is correct. There are 3 all total. The one you mentioned in Lethbridge, and I believe Coaldale and Milk River are also going to get schools. So this is the result of funding set aside for new schools in budget 2021. Around $1 billion, I think, is the number. And the announcement was made just a few days ago. No estimates available yet on what these projects might cost. I believe in 2 cases, at least, it's going to be the demolition of an old school and the building of another one. So, a few years off yet on these projects, but folks in Coaldale, Milk River, and Lethbridge can look forward to new schools, in the next few years at some point.
Yeah, that'll be tremendous. Now let's talk about safety for just a moment here. A private member's bill is suggesting to raise the speed limit on some Alberta highways to 120 kilometers an hour. Some say these highways were specifically engineered for that speed, not 100, not 110, but other experts are saying increasing the speed limit is not a good idea, citing some higher crash stats in BC when they did something similar in 2014. But Tyler, don't most Albertans speed in our highways anyway?
Well, it certainly depends on the highway, I would say. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone on Highway 2 who's going along at the speed limit. But yeah, this would, if it goes ahead, make this sort of change official. So you wouldn't be ticketed for going, 117 anymore. But yes, as you say, British Columbia did this, and some of the experts have sort of said that there is, I think, 180% increase in crashes or something like that because of it. Now, of course, a percent number like that is meaningless to some extent because it could have gone from 2 crashes to 10 crashes and gone up a whopping percentage. But yeah, it's certainly a balance between safety and the efficiency of the highways. So it's an interesting one, though, because as you say, no one actually goes the speed limit. So it'll be interesting to see if politicians, sort of nod to the fact that everyone's already kind of speeding and make it legitimate or not.
It's interesting as well. I've interviewed a lot of police officers over the years who told me that going under the speed limit by, 10, 15, 20K, not when it's icy, but dry road conditions, can also cause accidents. So, you're going to speed, you're going to go under the speed limit, maybe just do the speed limit would be safest. Our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, thanks for joining me once again from Edmonton.
Pleasure as always, Hal.
Overcrowding in Lethbridge public schools has become a problem in recent years, but will the announcement of a new elementary school here in town change that? Here to talk about that and the recent school boundary revisions is Christine Light, Board Chair of the Lethbridge School Division. Christine, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeanette.
Absolutely. So I wanted to have you on today to discuss the recent changes that will affect so many students and so many families starting next school year, right? So in September. So the school board undertook this huge endeavor, a 2-year endeavor, in fact, that involved changing the catchment areas that would determine which neighborhoods would attend which schools, right? So as a result, this fall, hundreds of elementary, middle, and high school students will have to switch schools because of the new boundaries the school board put into place. So let's maybe begin with why it was necessary in the first place to change the boundary lines.
Of course. Well, as you said, the process started just over 2 years ago, and we have been having capacity pressure issues on the west side for quite some time. We've had them up until Coalbanks was given to us from the province, and what we found is the west side is developing so quickly that even when Coalbanks opened, it opened at capacity, and within its second year, it was over capacity. So it really didn't alleviate those pressures on the west side. So we've been advocating for a new school. That's been our #1 capital priority project priority for the past 4 years. So what the division has decided to do 2 years ago is create boundary committees to really assess the 3 sectors of our city. And so we needed to address those growth pressures. So on the west side, we looked at boundaries, or the committee looked at boundaries. I shouldn't say we, because I wasn't on that committee. But they looked at the boundaries, they looked at population growth, they looked at trends, they did their research, and they really tried to find the best way to move students and fit students, because what we want is we want kids to have space in their schools, really, so that they can learn the best that they can. And so we were looking at west side capacity issues. We had a new school announced to us 4 years ago. The NDP government gave us funding for our new south side elementary school, which is opening this fall, Dr. Robert Claxton. And so we knew we needed to adjust the boundaries on the south side so we could have students attending the new school. And then we took the opportunity to look at the north side as well, and see if there were some boundaries that we could clean up there and just bring equity into our school populations on the north side.
For sure. So now, when I sat in on some of those board meetings, it sounded like there were some schools that were already at capacity, and I think there were 3 on the west side, right, including Coalbanks. So which schools were already at capacity?
Coalbanks, Proby, and Chinook are above capacity, so they're full. So what we have now is we have a school choice policy within our division. And so parents can apply to attend an out of catchment school, but because those schools are already above capacity, even with boundary changes, they're still above capacity. Those schools cannot accept new students.
Okay, and when you're at capacity, what is it? It's 90% full or something, or 85% full. So that's amazing. That is a lot of student population. And like you said, the west side has been growing astronomically. Did it grow faster than what the city anticipated, or than what the school division anticipated? Is that why suddenly all these changes happened?
I believe it did. Yes, we weren't anticipating such a fast growth. And I know in the last budget, we were really hoping to get approval for a new elementary school last year, and that didn't happen. And so we've just continued to advocate. And so we needed to be creative with our boundaries.
Yeah, so speaking of boundaries, how did the school board, how did this committee come up with those boundaries? So I understand it was quite the undertaking, like mapping things out and everything. How did that go?
Well, it's definitely a long process. So for the first 2 years, the boundary committees, which were comprised of division office staff, trustees, administrators, they did their research on the growing trends of communities. They did their research on student population and just where families sat, and they really they drew maps and they redrew maps and they redrew maps and they redrew maps. And one thing that this process has taught me is how interconnected our city really is, and the domino effect that one change can make on the rest of our community. And so you can have a fantastic idea for one school or one community, but as you see it fall out and affect 5 things after it, then you have to look at the long-term perspective of what that initial change can make. And so some of those things we could work with, and some of those things essentially said, no, we can't make this change. We need to look for a plan B, C, D, E, or F, right? And we just need to keep working.
Yeah.
So once they'd gone through all of those scenarios, multiple scenarios, they brought those scenarios back to the board. They updated the board during this 2-year period. We opened up the proposal. We made the proposal public on January the 12th, and then we opened the feedback loop, for the community and parents to give their ideas and their feedback on the proposed boundary change.
Yeah, I was just going to say, now, of course, you can't please everyone, and you found this out, obviously, through that parental feedback. So what kind of feedback were you hearing? I know on my end, being a reporter, I heard a lot, but I'm sure, I mean, you guys got to see, you had what, over 600 submissions, right? And you spent time going through everyone. We had over 600
submissions through the feedback loop. We also had personal emails and phone calls to the board as well. So we received those and we responded to those. And we had over 2,000 views on our website, just looking at the boundary presentation. So really fantastic public feedback and engagement, and we were thrilled to receive it. Some of the common perspectives we heard were the too brief of a period for feedback. Some people weren't impressed or satisfied with the 2 to 3 week time limit on the feedback loop. And I think just a lot of parents advocating for their kids, which is what parents are supposed to do. We love our schools, and especially our community schools. The community school just becomes embedded as part of the family and community fabric. And so definitely a grieving of families who are now being required to leave that community school and start afresh somewhere new. So of course, just hearing those concerns and those grieving stories, and I think that's the piece that was the hardest for the board to navigate through, because we want kids to love schools. That's why we're trustees. We love students and we love schools, and we want them to feel settled and rooted and build community. And so we knew that the decision that we would make would affect families significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like some of the negative feedback that I had heard had to do with busing. So kids who were at one point were eligible for busing suddenly had to switch to a school that was within that point that made them ineligible for busing. And what is it? Is it 2.6 kilometers or something? 2.4 kilometers. So yeah, and I think some of the concerns initially with the Copperwood students were, well, I don't want my 12-year-old walking up and down Whoop Up by themselves, or Métis, it's a busy road, parents starting work early in the morning, can't drop their kids off at work. And the great thing is you guys heard these concerns, and I know you made some revisions with that Copperwood area specifically, because at one point you had the boundary going right down Coalbanks Boulevard so that kids on one side of the road went to one school and kids on the other one went to the other school, right? So they're being separated from their friends, and you heard all kinds of stuff, right?
But you heard all kinds of stuff, yeah. And it was good. I mean, when you look at it on the map, it's easy to say, okay, well, that's logical. But then you hear from the families, and just that reminder of, well, you're actually slicing our community. And of course, we had to revisit that, and they advocated well for their community, and they were right. We didn't want to divide that community, so we changed the boundary for Copperwood.
Yeah, and from what I heard, all the Copperwood families were very, very satisfied with the changes that you made. And then there were some other changes that were made last minute. I spoke with some parents in the crossings who felt like it was they felt like it was a last minute change, because I think the change came up on the Friday before that Monday board meeting. And so they were supposed to switch their child from Coalbanks to Mike Mountain Horse, and then all of a sudden to, was it Agnes
Nicholas
Davidson?
Sharon.
Nicholas Sharon,
And
rather.
Nicholas Sharon.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what did you do
Yeah.
to satisfy those parents? Has anything been done since then? I know there was like the school first choice, right?
Of course, yeah. So the crossings community definitely felt ping-ponged back and forth a little bit, and understandably so. I think because they're in that, they'll be in the catchment for the new elementary school. There was a little more flexibility on the division side for where that community could sit. We initially had them attending Mike Mountain Horse, and what we had done was we put the crossings into Mike Mountain Horse, and we've moved Highlands down to Nicholas Sharon. And the Highlands community advocated and said, you know, Mike Mountain Horse is our community school. Don't take us from that school. So we listened to that community, and we redrew Highlands back into Mike Mountain Horse catchment, and then shifted the crossings down to Nicholas Sharon with busing, because they would be far enough for busing, and it wouldn't be a safe walking route for busing. And I think in the initial proposal, they were satisfied with Mike Mountain Horse. But because the shift happened after the feedback loop, I believe that the community felt a little blindsided. And so in hindsight, yes, we definitely could have had better communication with that community. And so we heard the community, and what we've done is given them first choice for Mike Mountain Horse if they choose Mike Mountain Horse. Because it is under 2.4, I believe it's 1.7, they won't be able to access busing. But even if Mike Mountain Horse is over capacity, families who have students currently in the division will be guaranteed a spot, as well as any children coming up in that family will be guaranteed a spot in Mike.
Right. Well, hopefully that will be some satisfaction anyways. Let's talk for a quick minute about French immersion, because that was another huge thing. So anybody enrolled in French immersion on the west side is now going to have to go across the river, right, to the other side of town, basically, right?
That's right. Yes, they will. That was a difficult community to navigate this change with. I think 2/3 of the French immersion students that attend Nicholas Sharon are outside of Nicholas Sharon catchment. And so they currently are already bused to school. And then that leaves the remaining 1/3 that are within Nicholas Sharon catchment that walk to school. So this would be the part of the community that this is their neighborhood school. People have purchased homes to be close to their catchment school. So very difficult, hard family stories to implement a change with. And so again, I think the French community really didn't believe that the 2-3 week time period for the feedback loop was long enough, and they've really expressed that they wish that they were part of the communication, part of the boundary process from its inception. But when we look at what's best for the division, when we look at the capacity pressures on the west side, we knew we needed to move approximately 200 students from the west side. That wasn't an option, that had to be done. And moving our French immersion on the south side, Agnes Davidson, and converting it to a single track French immersion seemed to be the best move for the division as a whole.
Yeah, it's like you were saying, so many family stories, so many people being affected by this as well. What a huge job that the board had. Like you must have had the pressure of the world on your shoulders at times. Now, this just recently, a huge announcement from the province, funding for some new public schools in Alberta, including one here in Lethbridge. Congratulations on that, first of all. So tell me really quickly more about this. This was a long time coming, as you had mentioned, and it's going to be on the west side, right, in Gary Station?
Yes. We're very excited. We were absolutely thrilled to be given this school. We learned about the new school selection on March the 9th. So that news came about 2 weeks after our boundary board meeting. And yeah, so the new school will be in Gary Station. It's going to be a 900 capacity school. So initially when it's built, it will have capacity for 610 students. And then we will be able to expand out to 900 students if needed. So a welcomed addition to the west side.
And it's looking at opening at the earliest 2025, right?
That's right, yeah, September of 2025. And so currently we have 4 elementary schools on the west side. 3 of them are south of Whoop-Up Drive and 1 is north, that's Mike Mountain Horse. So I know that this new school will be a welcome addition to the north side of the west end.
Right. And then at what point can we see the groundbreaking or actually see some dirt turned for that school?
You know, that process, that takes about 2 years to get to that point. Right now, we start hiring architects to design the school, and we start looking at the companies that are going to build the school for us. So still a lot of legwork to do before we break ground, but a lot of work, but it'll go by fast, I'm sure.
Christine Light, Chair of the Lethbridge School Division, thank you so much for all the information. I know there's a lot of it, and thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Jeanette. It was great to be here.
Each and every year, Canadians lose millions upon millions of dollars to scammers, to the fraudsters. Why and how does this happen? And what can we do to avoid getting caught in a scam? Joining me now to talk about it is Ron Riemann, Marketplace Trust Representative with the Southern Alberta branch of the Better Business Bureau. Ron, welcome back to BCN.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, Hal.
You bet. Now, first of all, can you explain a little bit to our viewers what the Better Business Bureau is all about?
Well, the Better Business Bureau has been helping people find businesses, brands, and charities they can trust. Millions of people turn to the BBB each year to view BBB business profiles and charity reports, all available for free on bbb.org. And we offer this free of charge. We're not a government affiliated government agency, so we're a nonprofit. So we encourage people to always use our website.
So Ron, the Better Business Bureau of Canada has come out with a scam tracker risk report for 2020 and a top 10 list of fraudulent scams that are ripping off Canadians. Can you explain the criteria used to rank the risk index?
Well, what happened is that we try to get as much data as we can, and it's available on bbb.org. And the risk report is collected and analyzed by the BBB Institute for the Marketplace Trust. And the most prevalent scams of 2020 were calculated and collected, and we found that surprisingly there were some new entries on our top 10 list, but in some cases there were not a lot of surprises. So a lot of data was, I guess we could say, taken in by the BBB Institute, and then we put together this top 10 ranking.
You know, we have a fairly significant senior population here in southwestern Alberta. Do you feel that maybe seniors are potentially at higher risk, maybe more vulnerable?
They sure are. They're lonely. They're vulnerable, and for the fact is that COVID kind of accelerates this loneliness, and scammers aren't stupid. They understand the way the I guess seniors operate in terms of you know, for seniors a handshake is just as good as a contract, and so the scammers they'll prey on that, and unfortunately it's kind of like even worse during the COVID crisis, and so we tell seniors to, of course, ignore these sort of scams. At the same time, we as family members should look out after our seniors, well, moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, you know, and talk to them and help them understand that you don't necessarily have to talk to these people. You can hang up. You've got the power of doing what you need to do. Talk to your family. That's the most important thing to remember.
So advance fee loans came in at #1 on your top 10 list. What exactly is advance fee loans?
Yeah, this is where a fake lender will ask you to pay for upfront fees to cover the administrative costs of a loan. And of course, these are scams, and we encourage you to contact us or the police about if that sort of thing happens. And it's quite prevalent not only in this part of the country but all across Canada too. So, and I found that quite surprising. I knew the advanced fee loans would be in the top 10, but I didn't think it'd be number one this year, to be quite honest. So.
Where are a lot of these scammers originating from? Are they in Canada, the United States, different countries around the world? Because sometimes I know when they reach out to me, even some of the phone calls, the weird accents, the bizarre accents that they have a lot of times, and their grammar isn't the greatest, their English isn't very strong. I'm wondering where a lot of these scammers and fraudsters live.
It's a very good question, and we do get that question quite a lot. At the office, I do get some of those phone calls, and they'll ask me, and quite honestly, I couldn't tell them because the fact is they could be anywhere. It's quite prevalent in Quebec, for our country anyways. Some of the hotspots around the world include China, Russia, India, and even the United States. So, and it's unfortunate we have to tell the consumers that do ask us, can you find out where this person is? I have their telephone number, but a lot of times they buy or they probably use multiple phone numbers. So phoning these numbers only kind of funnels it to a call center. So it's really, really hard to kind of narrow down an IP address, let alone a phone number.
It's interesting too, you see a lot of these CRA scams saying the cops are going to come get you if you don't pay me in iTunes gift cards. What? How do they think that's even legit? But apparently they're making some big money at the same time when they're doing this. Or they'll say, your TELUS account is overdue, pay us now. Click on this link, even though somebody may not have a TELUS account. But I guess maybe the scammers are thinking they can be quite successful with these scams.
It's a sense of urgency. We talked about this before we had this interview, and we talked about the most important thing that the scammers always rely on, because time is money to a lot of these scammers, because they have to make multiple amount of phone calls on a daily basis. And of course, there's this sense of urgency to the caller that they need the money right now, or else there will be either collections, or there will be the local officials, the police will be involved, or the CRA may freeze your account, and the list goes on and on and on. And of course, that's not how they operate. And scammers have only one goal in mind, is to get your personal information and of course your money. So again, it goes back to the caller and also to anybody who gets this sort of phone call. You have the power to actually hang up. And I tell consumers a lot of time when they call me, they've had 2 or 3 phone calls, and I say, because I understand the pattern sometimes of some scammers, not all, but some scammers, they'll phone 3, 4 times. Perhaps they'll leave a voice message, perhaps they won't. It depends on how urgent the other side of the phone call really is. And we tell people, even as much as you want to talk to this person to say, please leave me alone, it just leaves that door open for that scammer to continue phoning and try and get the information or the money they want from you. So we encourage you just to stop. Just let them leave the voice message, let them phone. Eventually they will move on. They won't leave you alone permanently. I've had instances where consumers will phone and say, I've had them last year, now they're phoning me again, and what can I do? Same process. And it's unfortunate and it's rude, because they'll phone you any time of day or night, and it can be frustrating.
Now, Ron, here's something you say: with the scammers, time is money. They have to hook as many people as possible. So here's an idea. How about you keep them on the phone for maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes and kind of reel them in and scam them and con them a little bit, so they're not, you're tying them up so they're not scamming other people. Play along with them for a little while. Just don't give any personal information.
And some consumers have done that too. They've actually literally purposely kept them on the line, and it just annoys them even more. And you would think they would probably, curb them away from phoning you again in the future, but it can work. But in some cases, they'll phone again, and perhaps maybe another person will call instead of that person, and then become even more aggressive. So it can work for you, but at the same time can also backfire too.
So Ron, what should someone do if they've discovered that they have in fact been scammed?
When I do get a phone call from a consumer, knowing that perhaps their personal information or their financial accounts have been compromised, the first thing I encourage them to do is to check their bank account via their smartphone phone, or their computer. If that's not accessible, then I encourage them to phone their bank and to let them know about perhaps if there has been illegitimate or improper spending on their account, to watch out for it. Banks are pretty good for the fact that they understand your spending patterns for the most part. If they know what your spending patterns are like for the last umpteen years or whatever the case may be, they'll understand that there'll be a red flag showing. And for the most part, they'll probably phone you. Credit card companies is another good place that you should probably phone to, just in case that your credit card gets compromised too. Perhaps in 2-3 months' time, phone the two big credit card, I guess the Equifax and TransUnion, who are in charge of your credit rating. Get a hold of them in about 2-3 months' time and talk to them if you know that your credit rating has also been compromised too, because there's nothing worse than having your ratings go down and plummet for somebody else's bad behavior.
Yeah, poor credit, that's right, absolutely. You don't want to see the scammers take advantage and cause your credit to plummet. Now, Ron, how are people getting caught online? What are some of the things we really need to watch out for?
How are people getting caught online? It's really, really hard. It's almost that there are certain elements of it that people have to look for to avoid a scam online. Is to check the spelling. Also check perhaps that I guess the grammar could be off a bit too. Also check too if there's a physical location or not. And if there's a link, please avoid hitting that link, because all it does is it opens up a Pandora's box, so to speak, for the scammer. So little things to look out for. Especially the grammatical errors. That's the one key thing to look for anyways. Most institutions, and including us, we've been scammed too. We've been utilized in a scam too, that they'll use your letterhead and they'll put it on their email to make it look really official. But we encourage a lot of people to update their antivirus software at the same time too. Most of them, not all the time, it will go to the junk or the spam folder, but we encourage them to always keep it updated, and understand your computer that it'll always do updates for you. And if you haven't done an update, please do so. And that'll actually filter out a lot of the online problems that may not come to your computer. So we encourage you to do that.
Ron, the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted so many people across the province, including right here in Lethbridge. So many people are desperate trying to find work. Employment scams were actually at number 5 of your top 10 list here. Can you explain how this one works, the employment scam?
If you're looking for employment, there's job postings out there that there's fake recruiter emails, and there's work at home schemes, and these cons actually use real company names, and they can be very convincing, and it may look as though you are starting a great new career, but you're really giving personal information or money to scammers. I actually had a phone call from somebody from South Africa about a month ago, and they actually checked on a company in Calgary, an oil and gas company in Calgary, and they were going to apply for a job. It turned out that the company's website was a hoax. They actually grabbed all the information and kind of moved it around a bit and made it look really authentic. And what happened was this couple from South Africa phoned me and said, "Is this legit?" And we had to do a little bit of a search on this company and found out it was just a copycat. And basically, they just wanted some money to get the people in from South Africa to Calgary, and basically it was kind of an upfront fee. But there was no job, there was no opening, and basically what happened was, if that couple didn't phone us, their likelihood they would have lost their money, and or they probably, if they went to Calgary, if they had the money and they didn't have any visa problems, they probably would have been out of luck. They wouldn't have had a job. So we always encourage people just to make sure to phone and do their homework, and because those websites can look really good, but sometimes they may not appear what they seem to be. Do your homework on the company. Basically what I'm trying to say, I guess.
Ron, any final reminder for our viewers on how to really avoid and sniff out a scam, and maybe how the Better Business Bureau can really help, be of assistance?
We're always there to help. And if people want to know more information about scams or anything that come their way, we encourage them to go on our website. We have a special place on our website called the Scam Tracker. If they feel they've been duped or they know somebody who knows of suspicious behavior of a company or something that people should be aware of, Scam Tracker on our website is a great place to go to. You can also get the updated information if you want to learn more about the current scams. We want to stay one step ahead of the scammers. It's a tough time to be in right now with this COVID pandemic, and it's only accelerating all these scams. And we encourage people to educate themselves, come to our website, or certainly phone us, and we can try our best to help you. And education is the key thing, Hal.
Thanks so much for your time today, Ron. Ron Riemann is with the Southern Alberta branch of the Better Business Bureau. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks for watching.